Hello. So this is a guide to 3v3 debating formats. I would say this is a lot simpler than BP, but I'd highly recommend checking that out first because in my opinion, if you understand BP, you will understand the 3v3 format quite easily. I think the difficult thing with 3v3 format is mostly the variation. I mostly have experience in Asians and Australs forms of debating, and those are two of the three we're going to cover today. I'm going to be talking about the Asian parliamentary format, which is mostly practiced throughout Asia. The biggest tournament is UADC. The Australasian format, which is practiced throughout Australasia, and the biggest tournament is Australs, or the Australasian InterVarsity Debating Championship. And the World Schools Debating Championship format, which is primarily done by schools or high school students and is done worldwide, where the biggest tournament is WSDC. So the format. It's a lot simpler than BP. You just have two sides. You have the government or affirmative, also known as proposition, and then you have the opposition or negative. The nice thing about all these 3v3 formats is that in terms of speakers, they have large similarities with respect to what each speaker is expected to do, what they're allowed to do. And these are expectations that still exist, or rather, are fairly reflective of their BP counterparts. So check out the BP video for particular speaker by speaker breakdown. But similar is that Prime Minister should set up, leader of the opposition should clash, and deputy speakers should back up their teams. The whip speakers should not build or create an entirely new argument, but they can support and rebut arguments. Now, the biggest difference in the 3v3 format are reply speeches, which we'll talk about later on. So here, how do they differ from BP? There's no opening or closing. You don't have to be new. You don't have to have an extension. You just have to rebut and respond to the other side and give arguments that are better than the other side. Second is they often have longer prep times. So BP will give you 15 minutes. All the 3v3 formats I know are significantly longer than that. The biggest difference, I would argue, are reply speeches, which will have its own section later on. But how do the formats differ from one another? I think there are four main things. Firstly is in terms of speech length. You have an 8-minute speech for WSDC and Australs, but only 7 for Asians. The second is in terms of POIs. You have POIs for WSDC and Asians, but not Australs. For prep time, you have 1 hour for WSDC, but only half an hour for Asians and Australs. And for the veto, or whether or not you're able to select the motion in question, you will have no veto for WSDC, meaning you will only be given one motion every round, whereas you have 3 motions every round for Asians and Australs, and then both sides will be given a chance to rank those motions, and then you will be able to finalize what motion you end up wanting to debate. I think another important difference, and I would highly suggest reading into the manual of WSDC more, is how debates are judged. Debates are judged pretty regularly and a bit similar to BP, just if you had 2 teams for Asians and Australs. But for WSDC, you have component-based judging as well, or component-based speaks. And so you will also have, say, for every speech, a component that describes the style and the score in terms of style, the matter within a speech, etc. These are fairly important differences that I don't think I'll be able to cover in one video without being able to go through the entire manual, but that's a fairly significant difference. The last difference that I also don't want to get too into is the speaker score range, which I will talk about more when it comes to the video about different tournaments and how tournaments work. But note that you are scored for every speech, and there are different number systems that are used as to how to provide you with a score depending on the format that you are doing. Now the format. There are still 8 speeches, but you will only be having 3 speakers on each side, which is why this is 3v3 formats. So you have Prime Minister, or first affirmative, or first proposition, leader of the opposition, first negative, then you have Deputy Prime Minister, or second affirmative, Deputy Leader of the Opposition, or second negative, the Government Whip, a third affirmative, opposition whip or third negative, and then the affirmative or government or proposition reply, or rather, sorry, negative reply before the affirmative or government reply. So I mixed that up, but this is correct. The negative reply comes before the affirmative reply. So you'll notice that debates often work in a crisscrossing fashion, where it's gov, then op, then gov, then op, then gov, then op, with the sole exception of reply speeches, where it's opposition whip, then immediately negative reply, and then the affirmative or government reply. So what are reply speeches? And I want to spend most of the video, or not most of the video, but a significantly longer chunk of the video than other chunks, talking about what is expected of a reply speech. So this is a speech that is 4 minutes in length and no POIs for all formats. And it is just an unadulterated explanation as to why does your team win this debate. But I think we've already mentioned the distinction between whips and other speakers of whips cannot provide new arguments, but they can provide new material. So they can do things like rebut, they can do things like give new reasons for certain things, maybe not completely new reasons, but maybe new ones that are responsive to the other side, etc. At reply, you are just not allowed to provide anything that isn't already in the debate. And now, what you're supposed to do is to persuade a judge using the existing material in the debate and explain why are you beating the other side. And you might be confused as to how you can do that without adding new material, but you could simply pretend like you are a judge and convince the judge that the way in which they should judge this is a certain way. So for example, if I'm a judge, I would not be able to give reasons that came just from me to be able to explain why one side won the debate. But I could use logical explanations as to explaining why one side took the debate over the other side. So at reply, I could do something very similar. I could say that they had this argument, we had this argument. Our argument beats their argument for many reasons. Maybe one is that they don't prove their argument very well, but we prove our argument very well. And I can just give explanations that were already given in the debate by yourself or your teammates in previous speeches and use that to explain. This then shows that we went through all the logical rigor to show our argument. The other side hasn't really done that. That is one way that you could possibly justify your side winning through a reply. Just using the existing stuff in the round and maybe saying it is more proven, it is more convincing, it is more important without giving new reasons for that. The last thing is that it can only be done by either of the first two speakers. So whether you're PM or DPM or LO or DLO or first or second and first or second on both sides. Basically, whips cannot give the reply speech. That's all for 3v3 formats. That's, I'd say, the most significant difference, and it might be helpful to watch some 3v3 debates to get a full grasp of what exactly a reply would entail.